Let's just jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're confronting an invisible crisis in India, one that really challenges how we think about progress, equality, and basic human dignity. We're talking about the deeply entrenched systemic practice of manual scavenging.
Right off the bat, look at this quote from sociologist Gaurav Pathania. It perfectly captures the jarring contrast of our modern age. On one hand, we've got India making massive technological leaps, literally reaching the moon with the Chandrayaan missions. But on the other hand, we have thousands of citizens dying in our sewers and septic tanks. We're mastering the cosmos, but completely ignoring the deadly ecosystem operating just inches beneath our feet.
Section 1. Childhood Struggles.
To really understand how this systemic issue shapes an individual's life, we have to look at the story of Bezwada Wilson. He's a man who took profound personal pain and turned it into a lifelong fight for dignity, eventually founding the Safai Karmachari Andolan. He grew up in the Kolar goldfields, which is a mining township in Karnataka, and his early life was defined by brutal segregation. He was forced to attend a segregated school that people literally called the Thoti or scavenger school. It was there, as a kid, that he realized his parents weren't just everyday laborers. They were trapped in the horrifying work of cleaning dry latrines. They had to manually collect human waste in buckets, with no water or proper sanitation, entirely because of the caste they were born into.
You can imagine the psychological toll this takes. Actually, it's pretty unimaginable. Watching his own community be treated as less than human pushed Wilson to the absolute breaking point. In the source material, he talks about going to an industrial hot water tank in the dead of night, genuinely contemplating throwing himself in just to end his life. He also witnessed how his community had to rely heavily on alcohol, drinking during the day just to numb themselves to the unbearable stench and the intense trauma of their reality.
So, what changed? Well, the core question that sparked his systemic awakening was actually incredibly simple. He looked around and just asked, why do only we do this work? It wasn't about them lacking education or just being poor. It was the deeply entrenched caste system. That realization that his people were trapped in this labor simply because of their birth is exactly what ignited his determination to completely wipe this practice out.
Section 2. The Long Fight for Justice.
Breaking a centuries-old caste-based practice isn't just about changing people's minds. It requires forcing the legal system to hold people accountable. And this timeline illustrates the agonizing drag of that justice. Look at how long this takes. A law prohibiting the practice was first passed in 1993, but it was practically toothless. A whole decade later, in 2003, Wilson's movement filed a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court. It took another 10 years to get a new, more comprehensive act in 2013. And finally, a landmark Supreme Court judgment in 2014 that actually mandated safety gear, rehabilitation, and strict enforcement. We are talking about decades of grassroots fighting just to force the government to acknowledge its own laws.
Section 3. Truth and Lies of the System. Now, you'd think a Supreme Court order would change things overnight, right? But the state's reaction was shockingly different. When the Supreme Court asked states for their status updates, top bureaucrats and chief secretaries submitted sworn affidavits claiming the practice was entirely dead, zero manual scavengers in their states. To prove them wrong, activists had to literally submit brutal photographic evidence. In Uttarakhand, for example, they had to submit photos to the Supreme Court 11 different times, capturing women actively cleaning dry latrines just to prove to the judges that the state officials were lying.
Section 4. Today's bitter reality. Because the truth is, despite all those court victories, the system is still failing these citizens on a massive scale today. Look at this number, 2,360. That represents the human lives lost in gutters and septic tanks that the Safai Karmachari Andolan has officially on record. 2,360 human beings. This data directly contradicts statements made by ministers in parliament who have literally claimed there are zero deaths from manual scavenging. So while politicians are claiming it's eradicated, activists are sitting there holding the files of over 2,000 people who died suffocating in toxic sludge.
And then we have to look at the money. While billions are being spent on space exploration and these massive national sanitation marketing campaigns, the current budget allocated for the Self-Employment Scheme for Rehabilitation of Manual Scavengers, the SRMS, is exactly zero. Let that sink in. 0 rupees for the actual rehabilitation of the people trapped in this system.
But this right here is perhaps the most damning piece of data of all. 0 convictions in 20 years. Despite laws making it a criminal offense to send a human being into a sewer without safety gear, not a single contractor, municipality official, or private employer has faced prison time.
When someone dies, a contractor might get briefly arrested, sure, but the charges are dropped and they walk free. It just showcases a total systemic failure across both the judiciary and the executive to protect marginalized citizens.
Section 5. Our responsibility.
But this explainer isn't just about government apathy. It's about what we can actually do. The activists have outlined a clear, actionable plan for when everyday citizens witness this happening. If you spot it, whether it's dry latrine cleaning or someone going into a septic tank without gear, here are the steps. First, spot it. Second, take a clear photo. Third, write directly to the district magistrate or district collector. And fourth, demand action within 15 days, which is your right under the law. By legally alerting the district magistrate, you force the system's hand. The law mandates an immediate relief payment of 40,000 rupees for the victim's rehabilitation. That gives them a real chance to survive without having to go back to that toxic work the very next day.
I want to leave you with this final thought raised by these reports. Will we continue to reach for the moon while ignoring the manholes in our own streets? The takeaway from these activists is crystal clear. Eradicating this societal sin isn't just a matter of waiting around for government policy to work. It requires our collective vigilance. We have to absolutely refuse to look away when human dignity is being stripped away right in front of us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. Let's keep learning, questioning, and pushing to truly understand our reality.